Thank you for joining us, whether you are joining us live right now in this room or watching the replay, because this will be available. The replay link will be sent to the address you registered with. So stay tuned for some bonus materials plus your replay link via email after this webinar is over. You can also adjust your view in Zoom when I begin the slideshow. So drag the gray bar between the slideshow and our photos to change the size of the presentation. Here we go. This event is being presented by our incredible friends at Chipotle. Our partnership with Chipotle began with the iconic Whole30 Salad Bowl in 2019. And since that original announcement, Chipotle has given us compatible chicken and fajita vegetables, released the limited edition carne asada and cauliflower rice, introduced super greens, and this year gifted us with a Whole30 compatible plant-based chorizo, which is delicious, a little smoky, a little spicy, so hearty on my Whole30 salad bowl. I love it so much. Chipotle knows you want more variety, and they have been delivering for the Whole30 community big time. And we believe, of course, as Chipotle does, that food has the power to change your life. And Chipotle wants to keep supporting Whole30ers with real food options that are better for you and the planet throughout your Whole30 and into food freedom. So a huge thank you to our friends at Chipotle here for sponsoring this reintroduction webinar. Let's get started, shall we? I'm going to move this chat off to the side so I can see my own slides, but here we are, Kickstart your Whole30 reintroduction. I have very carefully chosen a variety of memes, fresh memes for you, so that we can illustrate some of the points we'll be talking about. And as you can see here, people are very focused on the 30-day elimination when it comes to the Whole30, and reintroduction is occasionally lagging behind. And we are going to change all of that here with you tonight. So here we go. Getting ahead. So here's what we're going to be covering tonight. We are going to talk about Whole30 elimination diet basics, the ins and outs of elimination diets. We will talk about why reintroduction is so important. I feel like I've talked about this in a variety of contexts, but we're going to really go through it all here today. What you're going to learn from reintroduction, why it's so important, and what you'll take with you past your Whole30 experience. 3 of the biggest reintroduction challenges that I have identified in working with millions of Whole30ers over the last 12 years, how to complete a proper reintroduction, and you'll probably see a very special guest appearance from our friends at Chipotle here. What to look for during reintroduction. How do you know if a food group that you've reintroduced works or doesn't work for you? And we'll get into some of the nuance. And then I'm going to share some of my bonus tips for your food freedom. All right. So with that, let's get started. I see meme game on point. Thank you so much. This was a very fun presentation to put together. So let's talk about elimination diet basics. Elimination diets, which is what the Whole30 was founded on, the principles of an elimination diet, which, by the way, elimination diets have been around since the 1920s, and many healthcare practitioners still consider them the gold standard for identifying food sensitivities. They always have 2 parts. Yes, they're called an elimination diet, but they always are comprised of elimination and reintroduction. Both of those phases make this elimination diet, and both of them are necessary for you to learn as much as you need to learn from any elimination protocol, including and maybe especially the Whole30. Now, in the past, Whole30, especially in the first, call it 5 years of the program, from 2009 to call it maybe before the Whole30 book came out in 2015, I and the team focused heavily on creating resources for the 30-day elimination, because that's the hard part. That was the part that people were coming to the Whole30 and saying, oh my goodness, I can't have cereal for breakfast. I can't put milk in my coffee. I can't do pizza, with my family on Friday night. What am I supposed to do in these situations? How do I handle dining out, grocery shopping, meal planning, travel? So the first 5 years of the Whole30, we really were devoted to producing an enormous number of articles and resources for you to complete that 30-day elimination, because that's really the hard part. And in my mind, I kind of thought people would love the idea of reintroduction. That would be the easy part, where you get to bring back some of these food groups that you've really missed and that you really love. And like that part just feels like a no-brainer. People are going to be so excited about it. And what we have come to realize through our HQ staff and our Whole30 certified coaches is that a lot of people were actually blowing off reintroduction. You just weren't doing it. You either weren't doing it at all, or you weren't doing it properly according to the protocol. And therefore you weren't learning as much as you could from the program. So reintroduction is essentially the grape Jolly Rancher of the Whole30. I did some research. I'm not a Jolly Rancher fan, but I did some research, and it turns out people don't like grape. You like all the other flavors, but not grape. And when it comes to the Whole30, you want to do that 30-day elimination. You pay attention. You're in community. You're checking off your Whole30 day by day. You've got the SMS texts. You're in it. And then it comes time to reintroduction, and people go, no, I'm not that interested in it. Or you don't even know that it's a necessary part of the Whole30. So let's talk about why. Let's talk about why you tend to be blowing off reintroduction or not completing it as thoroughly as you could or should for the program. So I think the first thing that happens is that people go into the Whole30 without thinking about the program as having two parts. And if you enter the Whole30 thinking, okay, I will give you this, it is called the Whole30. It's not called the Whole30 plus 10. Okay, fine. Maybe for branding purposes, the Whole30 is just easier. But I want you to go into the program thinking that it has two parts, elimination and reintroduction, and that comprises your Whole30. If you're not thinking about it like that, if you're just thinking it's 30-day elimination, you're going to get to the end. And then we're going to say, okay, cool. Now you have 10 more days of a little bit more, a little less structure. You get to bring some foods in that you like, but you still have to pay attention. And you're going to go back to the Whole30 for a couple of days here and there between food groups. And you might just go, wow, that's a bummer. I did not, compile enough willpower to get through reintroduction. In my mind, I thought that the program ended on day 31. I didn't realize there was a second part to it. And you just might not be as excited or understand the importance of reintroduction if you're only thinking about it as one part and not two. If you think about the Whole30 being over on day 31, I wrote about this extensively in Whole30 Day by Day and in Food Freedom Forever. Your Whole30 is not over on day 31. You are simply rolling into the next phase of the Whole30, which is reintroduction. And there's a very special habit research component built into this idea that your Whole30 is not over on day 31. I read some interesting studies in researching Food Freedom Forever. These were studies done with smokers on airplanes. And they were looking at self-reported cravings because, you can't smoke on an airplane. So they wondered if someone was on a 14-hour flight, would their cravings for cigarettes when that plane was about to land be twice as much as someone on a 7-hour flight? And would that be 10 times as much as someone who just was on like a short 1-hour flight? What they found was that self-reported cravings were exactly the same. And it didn't matter how long the flight was. The flight could be an hour. The flight could be 20 hours. And smokers reported that their cravings were just as high on both flights. And why is that? Because when the brain senses reward is on the horizon, the cravings for that reward begin. And it doesn't matter how long you've been without that reward. It doesn't matter whether it's been an hour or 7 hours. And so when you think about this study translated to the Whole30, if you think about your Whole30 ending on day 31, what's going to happen on day 28 or 29? Your cravings are going to come roaring back. And you're going to think, 2 more days, 1 more day, 1 more hour until I can go back to eating all of those things that my brain is screaming at me would be so rewarding and so delicious. And now all of a sudden for me to say to you, actually, you've got this like 10-day structured reintroduction. You're like, my brain is throwing a temper tantrum and I now cannot ignore it. So thinking about the Whole30 is in 2 parts and not thinking about it ending on day 31 is mission critical in order to, wrap your head around the idea that reintroduction is a key part of the Whole30 and to build it into your plan for how you're going to complete the Whole30. So I hope that makes sense. There are also some additional challenges with reintroduction that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But one other thing I was thinking about just today as I was going through notes is that if you also have come to the Whole30 from a very typical diet, right, and diet mindset, those weight loss diets, those quick fixes, detoxes, cleanse, any of those kind of weight loss diets, typically you had this diet that you followed for a certain set of time. And when the diet was over, it was like, cool, see you later. You just dropped off a cliff. No additional support, no additional guidance, nothing about how to take anything that you may have learned along the way and turned it into like a sustainable lifestyle. So if that's your mindset coming into something like the Whole30, which is so very different, this idea of no, on day 31, it's not over. There's a new phase. And by the way, we've got you through this entire phase. Oh, yeah, we've got it all planned for you, all outlined, resources, support. Oh, and when you're done with that phase, we have another phase for you. And that's like your lifestyle phase. That's the phase that's going to take you through the rest of your life. And we have all of the support you need for that as well. That's probably a really new realization for a lot of people, maybe a welcomed realization, but you may not have realized that when you started the Whole30. So those are some reasons that people have not historically done reintroduction as part of the Whole30. But now we're going to talk about why you should. Why should you introduce? Why is reintroduction so mission critical to the Whole30? I use this analogy and I think it starts with food. And we're going to talk about an analogy here because I like explaining things in analogies. Imagine you have a bunch of different pets. You've got a dog, a cat, a rabbit, and a bird, say, maybe a hamster. I don't think birds are very allergenic. So you've got these pets and all of a sudden, like you adopted them all at once and now your allergies are going crazy. Your eyes are itchy, you're stuffy, and you're like, shoot, I think I might be allergic to one or more of my pets. So you say to your mom, hey, will you watch my pets for a month? I just want to see if getting them out of the house helps my allergies clear up. So you send your pets to your mom's and then your allergies get better. All of a sudden, everything just feels better. Your eyes aren't itchy, etc. Great. Then at the end, you say to your mom, sweet, I definitely know that I'm allergic to some of my pets, but I really miss them. Bring them all back. Would you bring them all back? And your mom brings them all back at once and all these pets are back in your house. What do you think is going to happen? Your eyes are going to be itchy and you're going to be stuffy and you won't have any new information about how to have these pets in your life in a way that is sustainable and healthy for you. Nothing. You'll have gone 30 days without your beloved animals and you won't have learned anything from the experience. That is exactly why you have to reintroduce on the Whole30, because elimination is just half of the experiment. In elimination, you are going to pull foods out that are commonly problematic to varying degrees across a broad range of people and see what happens. What happens to your energy, sleep, mood, attention span, joint swelling, aches and pains, skin, digestion, all of these different factors, cravings. And if a bunch of those things get better, as many of you in the chat have indicated that they have already, awesome. Awesome. Now you know that there were some dietary triggers for some of these less desirable effects that you had been experiencing. Now, if on day 31, you shove your face into pizza and ice cream and beer and wine and cheese and all of the things that you've missed all at once, and your energy slumps and your cravings come back and your skin breaks out and your joints swell and your digestion stages a revolt, how are you going to know? How are you going to know what to blame for what? Was it the gluten or the cheese or the sugar or the alcohol? You won't know. And I think the saddest thing that you could do on the Whole30 is give up a bunch of foods you love for 30 days, go through all of that hard work, and then not learn as much as you could from that experience. Reintroduction is half of the experiment. It's where you bring foods back in one at a time, carefully and systematically, like a scientific experiment, so that when you reintroduce wine that day, and that's the only thing you reintroduce is alcohol, and the next morning you wake up and you've got a headache and you slept like crap and your energy is tanked, you know exactly what happened because the rest of your diet was perfectly Whole30 compatible, which you know made you feel great. And you added this one thing back in and now all of a sudden you feel like poop. You know it's the wine. You can be sad about it. We'll talk about that later, but right? If you reintroduce white rice one day and you're eating, white non-gluten grains and you eat white rice with a meal and some quinoa with the meal. And the next morning you wake up feeling exactly the same, just as energetic, just as smooth digestion, just as focused, joints feel great, skin is still glowing. Awesome. That gives you valuable information about how those foods work for you. But If you don't take the time to do a proper, careful reintroduction, as we have outlined, and as I'll share with you here in a little while, you're missing half of the learning experience. You really are. And that would be a shame because you have worked so hard during your elimination. You've worked so hard, and I really want that work to count. And I'm betting you want the work to count too. So, what we're going to ask you throughout the course of this webinar is just give us 10 more days, 10 more days, 10 more careful days where you get to bring some fun stuff back in and learn as much as you can. And the real benefit to reintroduction. Susan in the chat says, okay. Thank you, Susan. That's all I needed to hear. Okay. The real benefit of reintroduction is that reintroduction informs your food freedom. I have said this before, but food freedom, as you know, if you've read the book or listened to the book, depends on two questions. Is it worth it? And do I want it? And you won't be able to answer those questions if you haven't done a reintroduction. You won't be able to answer, is it worth it? Because you won't know. You won't be able to answer, do I want it? Because you don't know how it's going to negatively impact you and whether or not that negative impact is okay. Reintroduction is the key to food freedom. And I want you all to have food freedom. That's the whole point of the Whole30 is to get you to food freedom. So I don't want you to spend 30 days working as hard as you have and having an incredible experience only to miss out on half the learning experience and not be well set up for your food freedom. That sounds like a real missed opportunity to me. That's why you need to reintroduce. And that's why we're here tonight, to talk you through all of the ways that reintroduction can benefit your Whole30 experience and your food freedom. Now, here's what you're going to learn in food freedom. Here's what you're going to learn in reintroduction. I've alluded to this in the examples I've already given, but here's what you're going to learn. Number one, what doesn't work for you? You're going to learn what doesn't work. When I reintroduced cheese on my first Whole30, I had digestive distress like I had never noticed before. And it turns out that like cheese, certain types of cheese especially, were just not my friend. And I now still to this day avoid goat cheese like the plague because I know how awful it makes me feel. It makes me feel like I have an alien in my belly. It's never, ever worth it. I know that now thanks to my Whole30. And I can avoid that unpleasant consequence when I'm like on vacation or on a date with my husband. So you'll learn what doesn't work for you. If you have a health condition, if you have migraines, allergies, asthma, rheumatoid arthritis, anything that food can directly and tangibly impact. I have a friend with RA. When she reintroduced gluten, she woke up the next morning, her joints were so stiff, she could barely move her fingers. Boom. Now she knows what doesn't work for her. Gluten grains don't work. And again, it's not to say that she will never include those in her diet again, but now she can make an informed decision about how and when and how often to include those in her food freedom from an educated standpoint, right? A standpoint that is very self-aware. The other piece, though, to reintroduction that I think we don't focus on enough is that you also figure out what does work for you. And that's the funnest part. You know, food freedom isn't just about saying no to foods. It's also about saying yes to what you know works great for you. And you're going to discover that in reintroduction too. You might discover, as I did, that some of my favorite foods work great for me. Oatmeal, check. White rice, yes, I eat them every single day and I love them and they work so well for my body. And I know that because I did the Whole30. Hot buttered popcorn, yes. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about this with so much enthusiasm because many of you are still on the Whole30, but I have figured out that there are so many food groups that do work great for me. Or if they don't work great, they work like well enough for me to enjoy some once in a while really special treats, right? Like gluten doesn't work great for me, but I know I can get away with like one piece of my mom's cake when she makes it for my birthday and I'll be just fine. And reintroduction taught me that too. So it teaches you what doesn't work and it teaches you what does work. And both of those are mission critical for building your food freedom plan. And when it comes to your food freedom plan, now you will be able to answer that question, is it worth it, right? And when I say, is it worth it, I mean, is eating this food going to mess me up? How is it going to mess me up? Digestive? Is it a craving thing? Is it like with alcohol going to send me off on a spiral of like wanting to eat a whole bunch of other foods that I know don't work for me? Is it going to make my skin break out? Is it going to mess me up? How is it going to mess me up? How long might it mess me up for, right? If my skin breaks out because I eat too much gluten, I'm dealing with that for like 4 or 5 days, and that really stinks. So now I know, and that will allow you to answer the question effectively. Is it worth it? Do I want it? Do I have a big media presentation in 2 days? That gluten, not worth it. Don't want it. Because it's more important for me to show up with clear skin than it is for me to enjoy that like random piece of bread that the restaurant served me. But, my mom's cake at my birthday, is it worth it? Do I want it? I might. Yeah, I super duper might. And I'm willing to deal with the consequences afterward. So this is the freedom that reintroduction will give you, is the ability to answer for yourself, eventually confidently, is it worth it? Do I want it? Make a conscientious, deliberate decision about whether you do or do not choose to eat that food in your food freedom. No guilt, no remorse, no feeling deprived because you were the one that made the choice. And that is true food freedom. And that's what reintroduction can give you. So that's why we're here today. So those are your reintroduction learnings. Now, let's talk about some challenges that you might face in reintroduction, the 3 biggest challenges. And I added a fourth here, a little fourth bonus one here too. We've talked about impatience already, right? So, you get through all 30 days, you really want to go back to eating the food that you love, or you didn't plan super well, and maybe you've got a special event planned on day 32, or your friends want to take you out and you haven't kind of explained to them like you're doing a little bit more of a structured reintro program. Impatience is a challenge. So again, as someone in the chat said, think about it like you get 10 more days. You get 10 more days of structured self-experimentation where not only do you continue to feel as good as you've been feeling on the Whole30, but you also get to bring some foods back that you've really missed. That's the fun part and the exciting part. So you can reframe impatience by thinking about the Whole30 as 2 parts right from the get-go. And if you haven't, this webinar will 1000% convince you that reintroduction is mission critical to your Whole30 success. I'm absolutely sure of that. Number 2, cravings. So we've talked about why your brain might crave reward at the end of your Whole30. We're going to combat that by not talking about your Whole30 ending, because it's not ending. You're just shifting into the next phase, which is reintroduction, which is just as supported, just as well outlined. We have just as many resources as we did your 30-day elimination. So if you do experience cravings during reintroduction or before reintroduction, understand that we've built into our reintroduction plan a plan for those. So right in our reintroduction structure, there's a plan for navigating cravings. And I will share that with you when I go through that reintroduction structure, but that can be another challenge. A third challenge of reintro is that you just don't know what you're looking for. Like you bring something back in and you're like, well, what am I, if it doesn't make you doubled over with stomach pain or your joints immediately swell, like my friend with RA, you might not know exactly what some of the subtleness of a reintroduced food could look like. The subtleness of, I didn't sleep quite as well, or my cravings are up a little bit. We're going to talk about things you can look for in reintroduction. There's a whole big list and a checklist that you can run through yourself that will help you identify and make the most of, does this reintroduced food work for me or not, and in what capacity and context. So we're going to cover that for you as well. And then bonus is peer pressure, right? This is the meme. I think it's from like a Real Housewives episode. I didn't see that one, but I think it's fabulous. Where, your friends are going to be sad. They thought that on day 31, they were going to get their like pizza, beer, wine friend back. And you're like, no, I'm really committed to this structured reintroduction so that I can make the most of this self-experiment and learn as much as I can. So navigating that peer pressure might be challenging. I happen to know someone who's like pretty good with boundaries that I bet could help you with that if you wanted to send me a DM, or maybe we could talk about boundaries later this week in terms of the Whole30 if you like. But setting yourself up for, my Whole30 is actually not over. I do have a few more days. I'm going to get to bring some really fun foods back in. And then maybe one of the strategies I like to talk about is planning your social event around your reintroduction day. So if your friends want to go out and have a glass of wine, make the day that you go out the day that you reintroduce wine, and keep the rest of your diet Whole30 compatible and just have a glass of wine and see how it feels. Or, as we'll talk about, make a plan to go to Chipotle for lunch. Chipotle makes your reintroduction so easy. And that's a way to be social, enjoy the company of each other, and stay on track with your reintroduction plan. So we're going to have a lot of resources for you there as well. So we've covered a lot of ground here in terms of why reintroduction is so important for the Whole30. And I think if you came into this wondering why you should commit to reintro, hopefully you are 100% sold. Now comes the practical application, which is how do you actually do reintroduction? We have a free reintroduction schedule on our website. It's outlined in great detail in the Whole30 book and in Food Freedom Forever, but I'm going to walk you through it here in great detail as well, because that's what we're here for. So we're going to talk through what we call our fast track reintroduction system. This is the one that everyone should start with. If you aren't sure how to do a reintroduction schedule, or you just want someone to like map it all out for you, this is it. This is your go-to. You don't have to go anywhere else here. So yes, it is a path. Absolutely. So here's the basics of Whole30 reintroduction. Remember, it's kind of like a self-experiment where the Whole30 is your control and the reintroduced food group is your experimental group. So what we're going to do is only reintroduce one food group at a time. You know why now? Because if you bring all your pets back at once, you won't know what to blame for those allergy symptoms. We're going to reintroduce one food group at a time so that you can really see the impact that that particular food group has on how you feel and how you perform in a careful, systematic fashion, okay? We are also ideally going to reintroduce minimally processed foods. So if you are reintroducing gluten grains, choose like a whole grain pasta over, I don't know, like a blueberry chocolate chip muffin, because that's got some confounding factors, right? There's some chocolate, there's some sugar, there might be some dairy in that muffin. We are really going to try to stick to minimally processed so that, again, from a scientific perspective, we are isolating that food group as best as we can. So a whole, gluten grains would be like a whole grain bread or a whole grain pasta, as opposed to some of those other more processed forms. You want to make sure you eat enough of that food group to really challenge your system. So if you're reintroducing dairy and you put a splash of milk in your coffee, there's a really good chance you're not going to notice anything. Not necessarily because dairy is a-okay with you, but because you didn't reintroduce enough to really give your body the exposure to decide whether or not it needs to react to that food. So you'll see when we get into reintroduction sample meals that if it's dairy day, you're going to reintroduce an entire, ideally like a full fat, unsweetened Greek yogurt with breakfast. Eat a whole yogurt. And then with your lunch, you're going to do like cheese, enough cheese, an ounce at least of cheese, maybe an ounce and a half over your salad or your meal. And then at dinner, you choose a different form of dairy. I don't eat a lot of dairy. Why am I blanking on additional forms of dairy? Sour cream. You would put a whole bunch of sour cream in your chili, right? Like a big spoonful of sour cream, not just a tiny dollop. You want to make sure that you reintroduce enough of that food group to really challenge your system and basically say, look, if you're going to have a negative experience, like have at it. I would rather know than not know. Okay. And then finally, this is the key. You're going to return to Whole30 elimination for 2 to 3 days between every food group. So you're going to see here, as I go through the schedule, that you are going to reintroduce one food group, go back to the Whole30 for 2 to 3 days. That has such an important purpose. Number one, if you do experience a negative effect from that food group, you're going to go back to the Whole30 for 2 to 3 days and let that negative effect subside, right? Because that way, these negative effects won't pile on. If you reintroduce grains one day, dairy the next day, and alcohol the third day, and all three of those had a negative impact, they would start to pile on until you couldn't tell what from what. So we are going to bring a food group back in and go back to the Whole30 for 2 to 3 days. The other reason those 2 to 3 days are really important is that if something that you reintroduce sends your sugar dragon screaming, you reintroduce wine and all of the entire next day, all you can think about is like going face first into like, I don't know, a bag of Cheetos or some ice cream or whatever. You now have 2 to 3 days back on the Whole30 to go, wow, I'm going to get curious about that. That was an interesting experience. I didn't expect that to happen. What came up for me? What kind of associations do I have with that food? And really think about how that reintroduction affected you, but then not feel like you have to like white knuckle your way through or abandon reintroduction altogether. You now have this set 2 to 3 days back on the Whole30 where you can take a pause. You're nourishing yourself from a place of self-care with a way of eating that you know works so well for you. And that can be a very grounding experience. And we want you to have that grounding experience. So that is reintroduction in a nutshell, the very basics of reintroduction. Now we're going to go through your categories of reintroduction. We have crafted this particular reintroduction schedule in order of things that are least likely to be problematic to most likely to be problematic. It's general, right? It's not to say that you won't have a serious problem with something that comes earlier and gluten grains will be no big deal. But in general, we've watched millions of people go through the Whole30. And in general, the food groups we introduce first tend to be less likely to be problematic. That's the way that we've scheduled them. Now, you'll see that there are 2 optional groups here, added sugar and gluten-free alcohol. These are optional for kind of 2 different reasons. First, added sugar. It's hard to reintroduce added sugar all by itself because usually the things that you want to eat that are sugary are also like dairy, like ice cream. They're also gluten, like a brownie or a muffin or a piece of cake or a cookie. So if you do want to reintroduce added sugar all by itself, completely optional, you can. You just might want to follow the examples here. So put some sugar in your coffee, add some honey to your sweet tea. Maybe you glaze your salmon with maple syrup or your chicken sausage with maple syrup. Use a honey mustard salad dressing. See if small additions of sugar throughout your day seem to work well for you in the context of a Whole30 diet, like a Whole30 foods. Whereas now you might be able to compare like, okay, well, when I put sugar in my salmon, when I put maple syrup on my salmon, no big deal. But when I had sugar in that, like Ben and Jerry's ice cream, that was seriously a big deal and my sugar cravings raged. So that might be a good experiment for you. Optional, another option is gluten-free alcohol. Not everyone wants to reintroduce alcohol, so you don't have to if you don't want to. But if you do want to, we do separate out gluten-free alcohol from gluten-containing alcohol, like beer, for example. You really want to separate that out because the alcohol could be a component and the gluten could be a component. So here are some examples of gluten-free alcohol. And when I say eat enough of this food to challenge, I'm going to say maybe have like a glass or 2, right? Maybe not 2, 3 bottles, but maybe have like a glass or 2, right? You want enough to challenge, but not so much that, as anyone who's taken a break from alcohol for a while and then gone back to it knows, that reintroduction can be harsh. So, keep it relatively reasonable, but try a glass or 2 and see how you feel. These are optional. And again, you want to go back to the Whole30 for 2 to 3 days between each of these groups if you choose to reintroduce them. Okay. Now we're going to go into the fast track reintroduction category. So first fast track official category are legumes. These tend to be the least likely to be problematic. And if you do experience problems with them, most likely it's going to be digestive in nature or perhaps some kind of joint pain and swelling. If you have an autoimmune condition, these might be problematic, but legumes. So this is things like hummus, tofu, soy sauce, black beans, all of these different options for legumes. You're going to bring these back. Pick one different kind of legume for each meal, include one of them in enough of an amount to challenge your system with each meal and eat that on the entire day. And then go back to Whole30 elimination. Next category, non-gluten grains. So less likely to be problematic than some other categories. This is corn, rice, oats, quinoa, buckwheat, amaranth, all of those non-gluten grains, bring them back in. Go back to the Whole30 for 2 to 3 days. Next category is dairy. Now we're edging into the tends to be problematic category for people. Who knows, right? Who knows? Again, this is to varying degrees, but this is where you're going to reintroduce things like cream or milk, plain old butter. Tends not to be problematic, but yogurt might, cheese, any form of cheese, whey protein. If you've really missed your whey protein shake, this is where that comes back. So you can reintroduce dairy and then again, go back to the Whole30 for 2 to 3 days. Okay. And if anyone is finding the chat distracting, you should be able to close it. So you should have like a little chat button where you can close the chat for yourself. I'm pretty sure. Okay. I just happened to notice that in the chat. And then finally, day 10, Your last category would be gluten-containing grains. So these are like the heavy hitters. This is your whole grain bread and pasta and cereal, couscous, crackers. And this is where you might reintroduce gluten-containing alcohol as well, like beer. Okay, and then you would reintroduce that and go back to the Whole30 elimination for 2 to 3 days. So this is essentially the fast track system. You can, again, find this on the website. You can find this in Whole30 book, in Food Freedom Forever. You'll find it in the replay if you want to watch, but this is the fast track elimination system. Now, after we get through the, here, let me just skip to the next slide. Hang on one second. Okay. Let's talk about some fast track FAQs because we requested questions ahead of time, and these are kind of the questions that always come up. So you want to know, can you reorder your reintroduction foods? Like, do you have to do them in this order? No, you definitely do not. It's nice to do them in this order because our resources are all designed to support this reintroduction schedule. And if you just don't really know what foods you really want to reintroduce, or you don't have a good plan, just follow our plan. That's super easy. But you can reorder them if you want to. If you really, really, really miss fill in this food, cheese, go ahead and reintroduce dairy first. Absolutely, you can. Just keep in mind that you want to return to the Whole30 for 2 to 3 days between reintroduction groups. Can you space it out more? Yes. Ooh, I would not ask this of you because I know that the idea of an even longer reintroduction may be intimidating, but I'm going to tell you this. The longer you spend with reintroduction, the more you will learn and the more valuable information you will take into your food freedom. So if you choose to separate out, say, cheese from other forms of dairy, awesome. You're just going to kind of add an extra day to your reintroduction schedule and 2 to 3 more days back on the Whole30. If you suspect, as I kind of did going into one of my last reintroductions, that corn doesn't work awesome for me all the time, split corn out from your non-gluten grains and reintroduce just corn one day. Maybe you do some tortilla chips, some popcorn, and some fresh corn on the cob with your meals and see how that works for you. So you can split it out or space it out as long as you want. The longer you take here and the more time you spend here, the more you'll learn about how these foods work for you and the more you'll be able to carry into your food freedom. Some people ask, well, what about the pancake rule? When can I reintroduce foods that are technically Whole30 compatible if you just look at their ingredients, but they don't work for the Whole30 because of the pancake rule? So I'm thinking about an egg and banana pancake. I'm thinking about this banana bread recipe that I've seen that doesn't have any added sugar whatsoever. And it's just like bananas and eggs and almond flour. Make that its own category. I love that idea. You know that every ingredient in these foods is still Whole30 compatible. So look at maybe like a siete coconut cassava tortilla. Ingredients are compatible, but tortillas are not. Bring them back in. See what happens psychologically to the addition of tortillas or like a wrap or bread back into your program and see what happens. So you can make that its own category. Also, do note that some of these pancake rule foods, these baked goods, have a lot of like alternative flours and prebiotics and additives that may be Whole30 compatible, but when I eat them in large quantities, my stomach does not enjoy them. So that could be something else too. Like I know for a fact that too much almond flour in any baked good makes my stomach super unhappy. Cool. I learned that because I reintroduced a food that technically fell under the pancake rule, that aforementioned banana bread. Okay, so you could certainly do that. If you don't miss something, do you have to reintroduce it? No, right? If you're not like, I can't wait to get back to lentils. If you just like don't care about lentils, you never ate them before, you can't really see a world in which you would love to eat them, don't reintroduce them. Absolutely not. If you don't miss peanut butter and you love almond butter so much that you can't ever see going back, don't reintroduce it. No big deal. The only time you might want to reintroduce something is if you suspect you do have a sensitivity to it and you want to test in a controlled environment what might happen if you accidentally get dosed. So if you suspect that you are extremely sensitive to gluten, you might want to test gluten in your controlled reintroduction environment to know how serious a conversation you have to have with the waiter when you're saying, can you please make sure that my meal is gluten-free? That would be the only exception. But in general, If you don't miss something and you don't want to reintroduce it, you certainly don't have to. And as I'll mention later, this is not your only opportunity in the whole wide world to reintroduce. There were things that I never bothered to reintroduce in my Whole30, and like a year later decided I wanted to explore them and reintroduce them in the context of my mostly still Whole30 way of eating. So that's something else. And then finally, like, what if I mess up reintroduction? What if I don't know, combine categories? Or what if I reintroduce something and I don't wait 2 to 3 days afterward? Here's what I want to share. If you are in reintroduction and something goes wrong and you're like, oh man, I really want to go back and do that the right way, just go back to the Whole30 for a couple days. I don't know how long it will take, maybe 2 days, maybe 4 days, maybe a week. But because your system is like so accustomed to eating Whole30, and because those reintroduction food days are just so sparse, there's a really good chance that you'll go back to the Whole30 for a couple days. You'll feel that tiger blood again. All of those negative symptoms will be reduced, and you can just start your reintroduction over where you left off. Perfectly appropriate. I don't want anyone throwing in the towel and giving up on reintroduction altogether if along the way, like there's some kind of misstep or you don't get it right according to your own definition. So don't worry about it. Just go back to the Whole30 for a few days. Once you start feeling great, tiger blood, this feels really normal and Whole30 natural again, then go back to reintroduction and you are good to go. Okay. So here we go. Some fast track reintro. Now let's just talk about how to build a meal, a reintroduction meal. It can be, I found, in the earlier days of Whole30, people were like, oh my, how do I reintroduce just one food group? Like, how do I make that happen? This is the easiest way for you to do it. It's actually so simple. Take a typical Whole30 meal. Take any Whole30 meal that you've been eating all along that you absolutely love and add something to it. That's it. Add one thing to it. So for example, the smoky sweet potato chili from the Whole30 cookbook, the Whole30 slow cooker cookbook. I eat that every single week. It's on rotation. It's absolutely delicious. If I were going to be reintroducing dairy, I would just make that meal and throw cheese on top, or I would make that meal and throw sour cream on top. If I were reintroducing legumes, I would make that meal and add some beans to it. If I were reintroducing non-gluten grains, I would scoop that chili up with some tortilla chips, right? Take the meal that you've already been eating that you know makes you feel amazing and add your reintroduced food to that meal. That's it. So simple. Almost the simplest thing you can do. Not quite the simplest, because you could also let Chipotle do this for you. And I do want to talk about how easy it is to reintroduce at Chipotle. In fact, it's so easy that we've got these really pretty graphics to show you exactly how you could do it. And this could be a really fun way to be social, to just skip the dishes one night, or to make sure that whatever you're eating just does have that one ingredient that you are looking to reintroduce. So here, I had to close my chat though. Hang on just a second. I don't know how. Okay. If you are reintroducing added sugar, here are two Whole30 options for you. Man, my chat is covering the slides, so I hope I'm doing this right. But yes, so you could use the salad dressing that comes with Chipotle that does have added sugar, or you could order a tractor lemonade with your Whole30 salad bowl. Boom, added sugar covered. If you wanted to reintroduce alcohol, you eat your Whole30 salad bowl, whichever compatible version you want, and you can reintroduce your non-gluten grain alcohol of your choice. Boom, easy. There are 3 options for reintroducing legumes at Chipotle. So you do your Whole30 salad bowl and you either add black beans or pinto beans, or you choose the soy-based sofritas instead of the chicken or the carne asada or whatever protein you normally would. That's how you reintroduce legumes. Whole30 salad bowl and all of these incredible options for non-gluten grains. You've got their corn salsa, which I love so much. You've got rice, you've got tortilla chips or crispy corn tortillas. Excellent ways to reintroduce non-gluten grains. Cheese, you've got queso blanco, sour cream, and dairy on your Whole30 salad bowl. And then gluten grains, you've got a beer of choice with the tortilla. That's like a great way to kind of wrap up your Whole30 reintroduction. So you can use Chipotle to reintroduce every single one of these categories and make your life easier or more fun or do fewer dishes. And that's what we love so much about Chipotle is they have all of these delicious whole food ingredients that I know I know when you reintroduce this one ingredient, their black beans, their pinto beans, their sour cream, that you are just reintroducing exactly what we want you to, because all of their ingredients are whole food and cooked right on site and absolutely delicious. So that's why I love Chipotle for reintroduction. And that's a really easy way for you to reintroduce using Chipotle as well. So here's the slide where we talk about what to look for during reintroduction. I mentioned that one of the challenges of reintro is you're like, I just don't know what to look for. Maybe some things are obvious, like, does my digestion go wonky when I eat this? Okay, so that's kind of the first thing on the list. Is it's a very common issue when you reintroduce something is digestive. But you may also experience some of these sort of lesser or more subtle effects. So yes, if you're bloated, that's pretty obvious. But think about things like energy. Do you all of a sudden on a reintroduction day feel like you need that pick me up at 2 p.m. and you haven't felt like that in weeks? That's a sign. Sleep. Is your sleep disrupted? Are you tossing and turning more, having a harder time falling asleep, or waking up feeling more tired? That's a sign. Cravings are another big one. If you reintroduce something and all of a sudden your sugar cravings are out of control, that's a huge sign. You can get as subtle with this as you want. And we're going to talk about reintroduction as a lifelong practice. But I notice when I reintroduce gluten that it does impact my mood if I eat too much. Maybe your attention span or focus, particularly with things like added sugar or alcohol, self-confidence, skin, all of these things, including, my friend's joint pain and swelling, maybe your allergies come back or asthma, maybe your migraines come back, your performance in the gym. These are all areas to pay attention to during reintroduction. And I'll share some tips with you about some ways that you can make the most of your reintroduction. So one of the things I really like during reintro is a journal, keeping a reintroduction journal. And that is just to say, on this day, I reintroduced X, Y, and Z foods. On this day, I felt like this. I noticed energy was down. I noticed the next morning I didn't sleep as good. I woke up and my skin broke out the next morning, or my rash came back, or I had hives or whatever. Or I reintroduced these foods and I feel exactly the same and I don't notice absolutely anything different. Awesome. A journal can be super duper helpful in helping you pinpoint some of these more subtle symptoms, but the way the journal can be the most helpful is thinking back to that, is it worth it? Do I want it decision later on in your food freedom, where the brain is going to tell you a story that like it wasn't that bad when you reintroduced goat cheese, or it wasn't that bad when you had 2 glasses of wine. And then you can go back to your journal and go, oh my gosh, I wrote that like I had the worst night's sleep of my life. I woke up feeling like I had the Sahara Desert in my mouth. I couldn't go to the gym the next morning and I was super cranky and craved sugar all day. And you can say to your brain, like, you're lying. It was really not worth it for me when I reintroduced per my journal. And I'm going to take that information into consideration when I ask myself, is it worth it? Do I want it now? Journals can be so helpful for helping you identify that. So that's one really fantastic reintroduction hack that I like. I also really like the idea of repeating reintroduction. I will talk about this idea that reintro is a lifelong process. Every time I eat a food that isn't Whole30 compatible, I pay attention to how I feel. And what I've noticed with subsequent Whole30s is that I can get more and more into the nuance of how these foods make me feel. So early in my Whole30 journey, I noticed that when I reintroduced gluten, I get bloated. I get very bloated in my belly. All right, that's fine. I can live with that. That's like a vanity thing. It doesn't really hurt. It just makes my stomach look puffy. Cool. By like maybe my 5th Whole30, I noticed that reintroducing gluten not only made me bloated, but it impacted my mood. I felt kind of down and not as motivated. And I know if you're maybe listening to this, you might be like, really? Is that what you noticed? I've repeated this experiment enough times to know that too much gluten makes me super bummed out in my brain. And there's also research that talks about gluten's impact on the brain and certain like mental health conditions. So like, I know that's there, but I have firsthand, experienced it myself. And the more I reintroduce, the more I can really dive into the nuance. So think about reintroduction like a lifelong process. You don't just have one opportunity to reintroduce something and you forever say, yay or nay, this is part of my food freedom. If you reintroduce wine 5 or 6 times in a row, and every time you say, that wasn't worth it. And then the next time you go, that wasn't worth it. And the next time you go, that wasn't worth it. That's an excellent learning experience. It often takes people many, many not worth it experiences before you're emotionally ready to completely write off that food or drink. That was my experience with tortilla chips and salsa. But reintro is a lifelong experience. And every time you reintroduce, you'll learn more about your relationship with that food and how it impacts you. So I like that mantra as you go through forward into your food freedom. And then finally, I mentioned this earlier, allow space for grief. Allow space for the idea that the thing that you used to really love eating does not love you back. And that sucks. Sometimes it really, really stinks that some of your favorite things you just can't do anymore. That when your kid wants to go out for ice cream, you just like can't enjoy it because you know it's going to make you feel really sick. It's okay to grieve the loss of those things. It really is. I don't want to minimize that. I don't want to make that seem small or petty. It's okay to miss things, especially if those foods are culturally significant or family significant. I feel like we could do a whole seminar on allowing ourselves the space and the grace to like grieve for some of the things that we have now learned and behaviors that we now know are not serving us, while also thinking about, okay, now I have this amazing sense of self-awareness to make choices that I know serve my highest good. And eventually I will move into that space of gratitude. And I think that's really healthy as well. A few final bonus tips for your food freedom, and then I think we might have time for one or two questions. I mentioned reintroduction as a lifelong practice. I got ahead of myself, but I think that's such a good tip. Also, things will change over time. Your context will change over time. Things that used to be worth it may not be worth it now, given you, I don't know, now work a 9-to-5 job or have a really young baby at home and can't afford to be tired and cranky. Maybe the thing you reintroduced last year that didn't work out for you, if you reintroduce it this year, your body is different. Your digestion tract has healed even more, or you're more active and that food works better. So continue to play around with reintroduction as a self-experiment and understand that what works for you perfectly today will likely have to change as your context and your goals and your body changes. Context always matters, right? You can't just say, is gluten worth it? Yes or no. If it really messes you up, it might be a hard no, no matter what. But for most of us, I have to ask myself, what's the context? You know, is it a crappy piece of bread at the restaurant that like I don't even want? Not worth it. Is it the cake my mom baked for my birthday? Yeah, that's worth it. So context always matters, which is why, is it worth it? Do I want it? Has to be factored into every food freedom decision, even if it just happens in an instant, all the time. You always want to come back to this question because that is never the same answer time after time because your context is always changing. If you have done multiple Whole30s, always reintroduce. Always reintroduce. You never ever do a Whole30 without reintroduction because A, that's not the Whole30. The Whole30 is elimination and reintroduction, but B, every time you reintroduce, you will narrow down and dive into the nuance of, is it worth it? Do I want it? And not only that, but is it worth it in what amount and how often and in what form? You know, I can eat gluten from a really good sourdough and tolerate that so much better than the gluten that's in like a piece of cake with frosting. The combination of sugar and gluten for me is especially like wrecking. So I know that now because I've done multiple reintroductions. Every time you reintroduce, you have the opportunity to learn more about your body and your food freedom and what is in your highest interest. Always take advantage of that opportunity. And then finally, as I mentioned, look for the nuance. Look for nuance in your experience and really use your tools like those food journals to help you narrow in on how that food works for you and in what way, and bring that forward into your food freedom. Okay. Yeah, that is the end of my presentation. And there we are. There we go. We're back. Okay. So I want to answer a couple questions that you might have. I know there are some questions. Nope. Hang on. I know there are some questions in the chat. So there is no app I recommend for scanning groceries. No, there is no app out there that's going to accurately tell you whether anything is Whole30 compatible or not. No, we are in the process of working on our own app. That's a work in process, and there's nothing out there right now that can do that for you now. I really want to talk about, okay, Pam, you can find the entire presentation via email. We're going to email you the link So if you missed any portion of it, you can watch back on the replay. Katie wants to know, does it take just one day to test a food? Not necessarily, Katie. I love that question. Not necessarily. If there's a food group that you especially want to dive into, as I mentioned, go ahead and break that food group out. So what I don't want you to do is to say, I'm going to eat dairy 3 days in a row and eat milk products one day, cheese one day, and yogurt one day, 3 days in a row. No. What I want you to do is say, I'm going to test cheese today. And you're going to test hard cheese and soft cheese, goat cheese and cow's cheese and sheep cheese, however you want to do it over the course of that day, and go back to the Whole30 for 2 to 3 days. Then on the 4th day, you're going to say, now I'm going to test milk and cream and yogurt. And you have a glass of milk with breakfast and cream in your coffee and some kind of yogurt or sour cream with your dinner, right? However you choose to break it out, go ahead and spread it out, but make sure that you include 2 to 3 days of Whole30 between each of those groups. And the longer you stretch it out, again, the more you will learn about that reintroduction experience. So that is a really fantastic question. Good job. Any tips if I don't have an immediate reaction to a particular reintroduced group? Yes. So this is where, Nikki, I'm talking about reintroduction is a lifelong practice. When I reintroduce one piece of sourdough, I don't notice much. But what I do is pay attention. And the next time I eat gluten, I pay attention. Okay, do I have the same amount of bloating? Do I have more bloating? Is that because I ate more gluten or because I ate it in a different form? Is it because I ate it 2 days in a row? When I went to Europe, I ate bread like 3 or 4 days in a row. It was so good. It was so good and it was worth it, but it really messed me up. And that's when I realized that I could do bread like one day, but I couldn't do it multiple days in a row. So you always want to pay attention when you reintroduce. Reintroduction is a lifelong process. So if you don't notice any immediate reaction, cool, you can take that as a tentative, this food works well for me, but keep paying attention because you may discover that there is a context in which that food stops working well for you. And it's really wonderful for you to be able to identify those limits for yourself in your food freedom. So I hope that helps. That's wonderful. I really want to stick to reintroduction questions, reintroduce food groups for multiple days. I just talked about that. Sugar craving. I'm not sure what the question is. At one point, can I reintroduce scotch? Love that question. You reintroduce that with gluten grains. So if it is a gluten-containing alcohol, you reintroduce it at the very end with your gluten grains. So one of your meals is toast. With one of your meals, you have pasta, and maybe you have some scotch with your Whole30 chili with dinner, so that the scotch is the only thing that you've reintroduced as part of that meal. So hopefully that helps. Let's see. These are great. What food is common for disrupting sleep? Number one is alcohol. Number one is alcohol. A tiny amount of alcohol, even if I have it with a meal, wrecks my sleep for the entire night. It really stinks, but it's just rude. It's rude, but it happens. Could be added sugar, causing blood sugar dysregulation, or processed carbohydrates. So that might include gluten, but like maybe it's not the gluten, maybe it's the fact that you're eating a lot of higher sugar, lower nutrient value, higher carbohydrate foods that are sending some blood sugar skyrocketing. It could be any number of things. And there really isn't like a one size fits all. That's the thing. No food group impacts any two people exactly the same way. But that's where a food journal can come in helpful, where even if it's unusual, if you think that eating peanut butter disrupts your sleep, then it probably does. And I will tell you that peanut butter is one thing that does disrupt my sleep, because if I eat it too late at night, it makes me really like bloated and kind of gassy, and then I don't sleep very well. So in a roundabout way, it impacts my sleep, and that's where a food journal can help. I'm going to do one more question. You can watch, Jill, you can watch this replay every day for the next 20 days if you think it's going to help you stick to your reintroduction plan. Absolutely. I love that question. And that's kind of a food freedom question. This is interesting. I technically realize that food is not good or bad. That's correct. It is not, nor are you good or bad based on what you put on your plate. What's the best way to control a small amount of fear reintroducing triggering items? This is a question that I think is fantastic to address with a therapist or mental health counselor, because it speaks to diet culture. It speaks to a relationship with food that is perhaps dysfunctional. It speaks to maybe it not necessarily being about the food itself, but about yourself and your perception of yourself around that food. So, I'm a huge fan of therapy. And when I suggest people go to therapy, it's because it's helped me so much. And I've unpacked so many of those issues. But one of the things I want you to think about, though I am not a therapist, is that we don't eliminate foods in the Whole30 because they're bad. We introduce them because they are unknown. You don't get rid of your pets because they're bad. You get rid of them because you suspect that one of them might be having this, giving you this allergic reaction. You don't feel guilty about bringing your pets back home. You're excited to bring them back home and to test it out. You loved them. You missed them. It's a wonderful experience. The same thing when you're reintroducing a food on the Whole30. You didn't omit it because it's bad. So you're not reintroducing a bad food. You are reintroducing an unknown food. You're experimenting with this food out of a place of curiosity, not judgment. And that makes it feel far less, there's less pressure, there's less judgment implied, there's less serious of a consequence, because if it doesn't work for you, okay, fine. It still doesn't mean the food is bad. Just means it doesn't work for you. And now you know. So really approaching this from a scientific experiment perspective and not thinking about, oh, I'm reintroducing this bad food. Sugar is bad. No, it's not. It's just unknown. We don't know if it works for you. It might work great for you, which would be awesome. So that's a mindset shift that we encourage people undertake at the very beginning of the Whole30 that might help. And I hope that helps you too, Julie. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Mikey. Mikey is psyched for reintro after this. I want to close and thank, of course, our sponsors at Chipotle. And I have a little prepared remarks here. So thank you again to Chipotle for making this event possible and continually listening to our Whole30 community and providing options that fit our ever-changing lifestyle and needs. You'll be receiving an email within the next few days that includes a replay of this event for any time you need a refresh. Watch it as often as you like. We're also sending you Chipotle's famous guacamole recipe and a resource roundup to support you in your reintroduction into your food freedom. I also want to thank Steve, our ASL interpreter, for being with us tonight and translating so beautifully. Thank you so much. And to my Whole30 HQ team for helping to produce this video. You are rock stars. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We had like 700 people live. That's absolutely incredible. Thank you for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope that you rock your Whole30 reintroduction, and you can always find me at Melissa Youll or at Whole30 with your questions. We are here to support you every step of the way. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and have a wonderful night.